listening to another episode of Tap Outs and Touchdowns.
That's right, everybody. It's Wednesday, and you know what that means. An all-new live football episode of Tap Outs and Touchdowns. As always, it's your guy, Bully Rye, alongside me, as always, decked out in his orange, trying to, do flash photography of himself. We got Baker Bill in the building. Bill, what's up, bud?
What's happening, man? It's Football Wednesday. Let's do this thing.
Football Wednesday. It's legit, the music in the background, I saw the flash go off, legit thought, it was a gimmick that you were doing.
So cool. Yeah, I broke a light. No worries. It's no problem. We can just keep doing it.
He's got paparazzi
so
in
cool.
his
Yeah.
house. Right. Quick reminder, if you're watching the show live on Instagram, YouTube, or Facebook, please leave comments wherever it is you're watching. Share the show. Get other people involved as we are going to be talking all things football tonight, and be a part of the conversation. We got a lot to talk about, considering I don't think there's much going to be there. I don't think there is going to be much to talk about next week, and we'll get into that here in a little bit. But as always, we like to start the show off with my favorite part of the show, and that's Homer's Corner. Bill, do you want to start, or do you want me to start us off tonight?
I can start. I'm just excited, Ryan. I mean, we just talked about it briefly, right? Tua Tagovailoa is coming back. And obviously that's where I'm decked out in the Ryan Tannehill jersey, because that's the only quarterback I have for the Dolphins. I actually have Marino too, but I'm excited, man. Tua is coming back. He will not wear a Guardian cap, personal choice. His family, he says he would rather die on the field than not play football. Literally said it. And so his family, no matter what he had conversations with his wife, he's fine. He's going to go play football. And he's excited to come back, and he's supposed to be practicing today. I didn't look up and see if he did. I just didn't have time, but I'm sure he did. And supposed to start this weekend versus the Cardinals. Oh, my season begins anew this weekend, Ryan. I'm so excited. I actually can start playing Jalen Waddle in my fantasy team. But that's all my Homer's Corner is, man. I'm just excited that Tua Tagovailoa is returning. Not only to watch him play, I like the dude, but he's a good quarterback. And you saw how terrible our offense was when we were using the trash heap of quarterbacks that we had, as backups. So really excited this weekend to see the Dolphins play.
I mean, y'all just lost to the Colts, so you need any
Thanks
sort
for
of
reminding
boost
me.
you can.
I appreciate that, Ryan. I sat and watched the entire game.
No, listen, Tyreek Hill came out on social media and said something along the lines of, "We back." So he's excited to have Tua back. I wouldn't be surprised if Miami went after a quarterback in the draft to give some sort of backup plan. Because we've talked about this all season, right? The fact that the Dolphins didn't really have a backup plan if Tua went down.
Right.
And so, maybe they go after somebody. Maybe Andy Dalton is available after this season, because at least he's a more serviceable backup than the guys that you've got.
Oddly enough, Ryan, they put out ESPN put out a list today of what the team should look for before the trade deadline. And Miami, they actually put out individual players that the teams should try to trade for. And ESPN wrote again that the Dolphins should try to trade for Bryce Young.
Yeah, I saw that too.
I fell on the floor for the third time after please. You know what? And honestly, here's the thing. I'm not sure I'm against that at this point. If you can get Bryce Young for maybe a 6th rounder or a 7th rounder, that is way under his value. I don't care if he has been terrible, right? Everybody saw certain things with him as a quarterback. So even if he's not going to be a starter in this league, you would think he could be some sort of serviceable backup. And if you draft your quarterback or your backup with a 6th or 7th rounder, that's not bad. So I think I could live with that. If they could get him for a 6th, I'm in.
Volley Polly comes in. Yeah, Cam Rising is going to come out for the draft when his AARP kicks in, because he's trying to apply for another year of eligibility in Utah. I mean, listen, there's another host of one of the Panthers shows that has come on the Cat Cave with me in the past, went on social media and said that if the Panthers trade Bryce Young for anything other than a first-round pick, then he is quitting the expletive team. And so, you really think somebody's going to give you a first rounder for Bryce Young right now? It's not going to happen. I mean, you want to talk about people trading stuff away. We'll get to it. The Tennessee Titans are having a fire sale because they know how bad they're going to be, and they're doing what the Carolina Panthers should have done. But we'll get to that here a little bit later in the show. I'm going to get to my Homer's Corner, and there's a reason why I'm decked out in my Carolina Gamecocks gear. Because South Carolina dominated Oklahoma. And I want to be, Volley Polly knows what's coming. I want to be very clear. Before the season, when I was going through Carolina's schedule, I said that Oklahoma, first of all, Oklahoma was not going to be that good. And that when you're talking about wins and losses as you go along the schedule, I penciled in Oklahoma as a win. And I got called all sorts of weird names from Clemson fans, from you, from other people. Yep. You're crazy. What do you mean you're not going to beat Oklahoma? Oklahoma's a top 10 team. What do you mean? And I had to continue to remind everybody that all 5 offensive linemen that started last year and a starting quarterback for Oklahoma left. And that their offense was going to struggle. And boy, did their offense struggle as South Carolina jumped off to a 21-0 lead in the first 6 minutes of the game, thanks to 14 points literally scored by the defense and another 7 set up by another turnover. They tried to start another quarterback to maintain the red shirt of their star freshman quarterback that played in the first few games of the season. And not only did they burn that quarterback's red shirt 6 minutes into the game, but after the game with a 35-9 shellacking of Oklahoma in Oklahoma, they fired their offensive coordinator. South Carolina wins the first matchup that they ever had against Oklahoma. So they have a career winning percentage of 1,000 against the Oklahoma Sooners. And if you didn't know this already, South Carolina is the team that you don't lose to because it gets people fired. We got Philip Fulmer fired back in the 2000s. We got Will Muschamp fired when he was at Florida. We are the university. We are the football program that is surefire way to get your own coach fired, and it happened again here in Oklahoma. Bill, what you got a thought?
I'm pretty sure you're not supposed to brag about that, though. That means that we got beat by. It's like getting beat by Vanderbilt at this point. You're not supposed to brag about those kinds of things.
I don't listen. I don't care. Like, the fact of the matter is, the
yay, we're so bad we get people fired when we beat them.
Well, the point is, like, you don't come and lose to South Carolina because you're going to lose your job along with the game, and eventually people are going to start putting respect on Shane Beamer and South Carolina's name. We got a solid defense. They're trying to come up with nicknames.
Work to do.
Oh, there's work to do on the offense, but people like to forget about the fact that our offense was lights out against LSU in the first half of that game until Lenora Sellers went down, and the offense has not been the same since. But they were firing on all cylinders against LSU. Granted, they went into the bye week. There's a lot of guys banged up. Rocket Sanders, Lenora Sellers, Jared Brown. A lot of guys on that offense were banged up. Going into the first bye week against Ole Miss, come out, we looked terrible. Worst game of the season against Ole Miss. But we had a good offensive showing against Alabama. Lenora Sellers outplayed Jalen Milroe. And so we get another bye week before we head into next weekend's, not this coming weekend, but next weekend's game against Texas A&M, a 7:45 kickoff that we're going to have to find somewhere showing it in Florida as we're going to be on our way to a cruise that Saturday. But nevertheless, I think we got a good. I'm not saying we're going to beat Texas A&M. There's a game we're going to talk about in college football that Texas A&M plays a part into this weekend, and that's gonna sort of tell me how I feel about going to that Texas A&M game. But if you would ask South Carolina fans at this point in the season, if you were 4-3, if we were doing well, they would have loved it. But now they're complaining because we should have beaten LSU and we had chances to beat Alabama and we blew it. And so Carolina fans are still upset about the fact that certain things aren't working out when we're 2 or 3 plays away from being a 6-1 football team. So as Shane Beamer says, South Carolina fans, find some joy because South Carolina is doing great. We got someone, Bryson T. I hope you say to it's like it's okay. It's
can I say something, Bill, about your South Carolina Gamecocks?
Please do. Do.
Honestly, this is the way I feel about this. I think you and I are both in a decent place right now. I think that Florida Gators pounded Kentucky over the weekend. Granted, that's not beating Oklahoma, but maybe it is. I don't know. Oklahoma seems pretty bad at this point. But they did do well. I think we're both in a fairly decent place sitting at 4-3. I feel like the Gators maybe could have been a game better. I think they should have won that Tennessee game. Ooh, that would have been crazy, wouldn't it? But I think you guys should be at least a game better. Yeah, with the LSU game. But my issue with this whole thing is as I say that, and I feel like Lenore Sellers looks really good. I think that's something to be really optimistic about moving forward for you guys. What is good about him is he is a local boy, and the likelihood of him actually transferring is not high. We've got DJ Lagway. He looked pretty decent against Kentucky, so I feel pretty good about him. I think he only completed 77 passes for 250 some yards. Ryan, that was DJ Lagway's. So he throws deep a lot. My issue with that whole thing is we go, yeah, we're really excited about players and the players we have and everything, but this season's lost, right? We're both 3 lost teams. No matter what happens the rest of the season, nothing good is going to go into we're not going to make the playoffs, even if we won out. It's not going to happen as a 3 lost team.
I'll give you a scenario, but please
it's not happening. I don't even want to talk about it because it's not happening. It's ridiculous. There's just no way that a 3 lost team's getting into the playoffs. Not with Army and Navy both being undefeated right now. The only team they could possibly lose to is Notre Dame.
But I know you got a thought. I want you to finish your thought. No.
Finish the thought. My issue with that whole thing is the transfer portal. Is we can both get excited about our teams, but at the end of the season, you have no idea what players are going to be there the next season. I cannot stand this state of college football. Like I love DJ Lagway, but do I want to get behind him? He's a true freshman, and if Florida doesn't do well going down the stretch, which they play an absolute gauntlet of teams coming up here with 3 top 10 ranked teams and 1 other team in the top 25 in the next 4 games, it's going to be awful. And if he decides to transfer out, all the optimism of having, that we have for this team is gone. And I have a hard time getting, and I keep saying this year after year. Now that with this ridiculous transfer portal, I cannot get behind these teams anymore. I just don't feel any connection to them.
You got to have faith in your coaching staff to be able to maintain and keep those key players. Like I know South Carolina's defense is going to lose a lot of guys in the offseason. A lot of guys. A lot of
faith to have. It's a lot of faith to have. I can't. It makes it tough for me.
But a lot of guys that we've lost in the transfer portal are not at those positions that we have kept people. Like we were able to pull in Kyle Kennard alongside recruiting a guy like Dylan Stewart, who
so it's a plus year, but it could immediately turn around and be a negative year. You know what I'm saying? Like there could be a plus year where you do well, the next year you do poorly.
I get the pessimism. As a South Carolina fan, as long as you keep most of the coaching staff on lock, I think you got a good shot to keep a lot of those guys. Now, I don't know if you saw this. There was a 5-star quarterback that I think had committed to Georgia. I forgot where he committed, but he decommitted, and he's a class of 2026, and there is a strong likelihood that he is going to commit to South Carolina.
You don't need him.
But this is 2026. This is 2 years from now.
That's true. Okay.
So we are talking about the future here, and if you can keep that's the biggest problem with college football, right? Is that you cannot build consistency if you change coaching staff, because that coaching staff is going to take all the guys that he's recruiting and take them wherever he goes. Yeah. So all these people that want guys like Billy Napier and Shane Beamer, all those guys, all the fans that want these guys gone after 2 or 3 years, you're not going to build a program when you've got coaching turnover over 3 or 4 years, especially in this climate of NIL and transfer portal,
The team that irritates me is the team you beat this weekend. They had Dylan Gabriel, who had transferred there, 2 seasons prior to that? And then they're decent. Oklahoma's decent. He doesn't feel it. He transfers to Oregon. Now he's the quarterback at Oregon in his 5th freaking season. He was the quarter. I mean, do you remember where his college career started?
I have no idea, honestly.
UCF. He started his career at UCF. Fair. I think he played 2 seasons. He started as a true freshman at UCF. I don't even know how. I think that because they got an extra year of eligibility for COVID, I think that's what happened, and that's why he's got an extra year. So he's now played. This is his 5th season, Dylan Gabriel, in college football as a starting quarterback.
But to your point, though,
there was no change there. There was no coaching change. Yeah. He just said, and now Oklahoma's garbage. That's what makes me feel like this whole environment is terrible, because the same thing could happen to any of our teams.
When the offense was that bad in Oklahoma and you don't see it getting better, that's when you leave. So that's the concern about South Carolina right now. A lot of fans want to see Dowell Loggins off the coaching staff. A lot of fans were concerned because Shane Beamer seemed to be loyal to a fault with Marcus Satterfield. And in Satterfield's final offseason, when it was Shane Beamer basically said, listen, we're going to let you go, or you can go find you another job. And he did. And now he's a struggling offensive coordinator in Nebraska. Yeah. So if you can see it on the sidelines when our offense is playing, the camera will pan to Shane Beamer. You can see his frustration. You can hear in what he says in the post-game interviews and in the mid-game interviews, talking about, I wish we would have done this. I wish we could have done that. I wish we could have done this. And so, like, he knows that he wants the offense to be better. And so if this isn't going to work, then he needs to find somebody else, and he will. But, yeah, it's, again, to your point, it's very uneasy in this climate of NIL and the transfer portal to get excited about your team's future. But listen, welcome to being a South Carolina fan, because our motto for a century has been just wait till next year. But no, when you said we aren't going to make the playoffs, listen, think about the status of the SEC right now. Texas lost to Georgia, who lost to Alabama, who lost to Vanderbilt, who lost to Georgia State. The SEC could turn around and just beat each other, beat each other up.
I said it was going to happen. I said
every SEC team could wind up with 2 or 3 losses. If Florida or South Carolina runs the table and everybody else is just getting beat up by each other, Vanderbilt plays Texas this week.
Yeah,
I know it sounds really funny to say, "Oh, Vanderbilt's going to beat Texas." We didn't think Vanderbilt was going to beat Alabama, and they did. So the SEC could beat each other up, and you can find some 3-loss SEC teams in the playoff. You never know.
No, stop it.
I'm being facetious.
So my issue is there's too many middle of the road Big 10 and Big 12 teams right now. I don't think you're
by middle of the road. You mean really bad?
No. Like you've got like Illinois, who can't get respect. They've one lost. Indiana, undefeated, can't really get respect. Like they're teams that are beating teams. You know, Illinois just beat Michigan this week. Michigan's terrible, but Michigan was a 2-loss team and was almost ranked higher than Illinois with 1 loss. So they just don't get respect. So I think these teams are going to continue to be decent. Those teams are going to have 2 losses at the most coming down to the end of the season. That's going to leave out the SEC teams that have 3 losses.
Well, let's talk about some college football teams that had some interesting weekends last weekend. Because we had some I wouldn't say interesting outcomes, but we are talking about South Carolina beating up on Oklahoma. How about Florida State losing again? This time to Duke. To Duke.
I freaking love it. I love it. Are we actually going to see Mike Norvell get fired 1 year after going undefeated and whining like he was the biggest crybaby in the world? I mean, this is amazing. Like, this is karma, like in front of us. Like, here you go.
I've got a better question. They've done this 30 for 30. They've done this documentary about the Florida Gators, the Urban Meyer Gators with Tim Tebow and Aaron Hernandez. I want to know who's going to do the documentary about this complete and absolute nosedive that Florida State has taken 1 year after being undefeated.
What would you call it?
I mean,
the sinking of the canoe. Like what?
That's probably a good one. This is the sinking of the Florida State Titanic.
Yeah, this is terrible.
I mean, it was the first time ever, according to Volley Polly, that Duke beat Florida State. The first time they've ever beaten Florida State. I mean, listen, I made a joke earlier. I was talking to someone about dating apps and like what people had heard. And so if somebody listens to this podcast, they might recognize the conversation. But I asked someone what's the weirdest thing they heard somebody say to them on a dating app. And I was told it was somebody asked her to marry them, or someone asked her to marry her on like their first conversation. And I'm like, I've heard of love bombing, but that's a love nuke. Like that's how cataclysmic, or I'm not sure if that's the right word, it feels with Florida State right now. It feels like a nuclear bomb went off when they didn't make a playoff last year, and they're still recovering. Like, I don't mean to be insensitive to Hiroshima and is it Nagasaki that the other bomb went off? Oh. But that's what it feels like in Florida State right now. It just doesn't feel good to be Florida. Listen, I would say that I'm sorry for Florida State fans, but you're getting what you deserve right now.
Pedro that used to come in here is a Florida State fan, isn't he?
Yeah. I feel bad for him because he's a listener. He watches the show.
Yeah.
But everybody else, like, listen, Florida State's kind of getting what they deserve, considering the fact that, like, they all quit when they didn't make the playoff. Like, we're done. And it's trickled over into the season. They're not even playing DJ Uiagalelei anymore. They moved on to a new quarterback, and they're still terrible. Let's move on from Florida State because you talked about Indiana.
Hang on. I just want to say I'm all for this right now. As a Florida Gators fan, I am all for the implosion of Florida State football. I saw a tweet this week that somebody said that Florida State should just cancel their football program now. Go the way of UAB and just get rid of it. It's broken and it's junk. We called this, Ryan. We said this is going to come back to bite them in the butt. The culture was terrible. They looked like babies last year, and now they are. They're playing like a bunch of children, and it's wonderful. I'm all for this.
I saw one of those memes like on College Football Troll on Facebook or something, and it said Florida State now suing the college football playoff to allow 132 teams in the playoff. They're so bad.
Tournament goes into October.
Oh my God. No, like it's, you don't even have a regular season. It just automatically goes. It's based on how you finished last year. That's how the seeding goes. And the season starts in August and it finishes up in April. And there's your college football season.
Florida State dropped its suit against the ACC because the American Athletic Conference doesn't want them either.
That's great. All right, let's move on from Florida State. No, you talked about Indiana. Number 16 Indiana pounding Nebraska 56-7. I believe Indiana is still undefeated. Is that right, Bill? And
Nebraska is still undefeated. Yes.
Nebraska was thought to be a pretty decent team.
Yes.
But like I mentioned earlier, Marcus Satterfield is the offensive coordinator, not faring so well. And that kid, I can't remember his name, but the kid that likes to emulate Patrick Mahomes, the quarterback for Nebraska,
Dylan Raiola.
Dylan Raiola. He's not looking too great. Do you think this is more of a Nebraska just wasn't as good as people thought they were, or
no?
Or do you think should Indiana be a top 10 team right now?
Yes. Yes, you're in the Big Ten. Yes, why not? Just because they're Indiana, they're not. That's the only reason. You're a top 10 team, you're a Big Ten team that is undefeated. Yes, you should be in the top 10 right now.
Indiana became a football school this season. I think it's safe to say.
That's not fair. Michael Penix started his career at Indiana.
Where did he finish?
Washington.
That's okay. And where did he played for national title, right? He made the playoff. Did Indiana make the playoff?
Played for the national title last year. Do you remember Antoine Randall L?
He went to Indiana?
Indiana.
Yeah. Who cares?
I don't know why I know all these stupid Indiana
Did he win a title at Indiana?
No, they've never been good. Actually, they've been okay. There are times they've been okay. Illinois, there are times they've been okay, and they're still getting no respect. But Indiana, the way that they're pounding teams, it's not fair. And like you said, the Nebraska team was actually pretty good. They were just coming off of a win against Rutgers. They beat Purdue. Purdue's terrible. They beat Northern Iowa. They beat Colorado 28-10, and Colorado's looking pretty respectable this year. Yeah. And I mean, they were 5-1 coming into the game, and they got absolutely used the term shellacked. Yours was a win. It was a good win, but the Indiana game against Nebraska, that wasn't even competitive.
No, not at all. Talk about competitive games and not being competitive. This game was actually pretty fun to watch. Number 6 Miami wins another dogfight against Louisville. People expected Louisville to be a pretty good team, and they kept up with Miami. Miami's kind of gotten bailed out in a couple of games this season.
This is not fair. But we're talking about Indiana being undefeated and Miami sitting at number 6, and Miami wins every game by a touchdown.
Yeah.
With Cam Ward, who they're like, oh, he's the Heisman Trophy winner. Okay, so they score a lot of points, but their defense apparently can't see. So
yeah, I mean, on top of it, Miami doesn't have to play Clemson. When you talk about Louisville's schedule, they have to play Clemson. People are Clemson fans are sort of that Louisville is one of their bigger concerned games right now. But after losing to Miami, all of a sudden they're not worried about them anymore. No, you need to be worried. There's 2 games left on Clemson's schedule they need to be worried about. It's Louisville and it's South Carolina from the defense perspective alone. The only good defense Clemson has played this year has been Georgia, and they didn't score a touchdown against Georgia. So Louisville being able to keep their own, hold their own with Miami, I think says more about Louisville than it does about Miami. Like you said, Miami's winning all these games by a touchdown. Eventually, I mean, they get an easy game this weekend. We'll talk about that here in a second. But Miami sort of missed the real gauntlet of the ACC outside of Louisville this year. So
they don't play a ranked team all season. The next team they're supposed to play is Florida State. That was supposed to be their tough game, and obviously that's probably the easiest game going down the stretch. Then it's Duke, Georgia Tech, Wake Forest, and Syracuse. Ooh, give me that schedule as Florida, and we win out.
Yeah, I think both Florida and South Carolina could run the table in the SEC like Clemson and Miami are. Let's go to the next game. You talked about Tennessee a second ago. Number 2 Tennessee gives this is what they were ranked last week. Number 11 Tennessee gives number 7 Alabama their second loss in 3 games. I was talking to somebody about this earlier. If Alabama doesn't find a win that South Carolina game, this could be their 3rd loss in a row. Alabama's now lost 2 games before the month of November for the first time since 2007. I believe that was the year that Nick Saban lost to Louisiana Monroe in his initial year in Tuscaloosa. Tennessee had to take it to overtime to beat Florida, but they're able to sort of control this game against Alabama. Are we seeing more of an incline into the quality that we're going to get out of Tennessee going forward? Or is this just a drastic drop-off for the Alabama Crimson Tide a year after Nick Saban retires?
I think it's a drastic drop-off for Alabama. It's unfortunate, too, because I think they ended up with a pretty good coach with DeBoer, but they're just not playing well right now. But, I mean, looking at Tennessee, look, you got to run
top 10 team.
You got to run into Georgia. Sorry, like that's your downfall. You're a
Georgia that
team.
Alabama beat, by the way.
I understand that, but they're playing at Georgia, and Georgia just showed us all what Georgia's about to be.
Yeah, speaking of Georgia, that's the next game that we had to talk about here. Number 5, Georgia. Honestly, they dominated the University of Texas until the second half of that game, knocking off former number 1 Texas to bump up Oregon to the number 1 spot in the country. Bill, we'll get into podcast pick'ems here in a bit too, but we picked opposite. You thought Texas was going to win this game, and I said Georgia had it. Georgia didn't look great.
Ryan. They duped me. I thought Texas was actually as good as advertised. They are not. Sarkisian needs another drink, and Georgia's good again. Georgia's good again. I'm sorry, that's terrible. He was an alcoholic.
That was really bad.
I'm sorry.
Yeah, really bad.
Bad boy. That was bad.
Bad Bill. Bad Bill.
Unfortunately, Texas not as good as we thought. They'll still make the playoff. I'm not looking at their. We could look at their schedule, but Georgia's good, man. They're good, and I'm still not a believer in Carson Beck. But what are you going to do? I mean, they're getting it done. They have just horses on that team, so
yeah,
they're good again. You were talking about Texas. They play Vanderbilt. You were talking about that. They're at Vanderbilt, so who knows? Could we have take 2?
That's where Alabama here? Alabama lost at Vanderbilt on the road in Nashville.
Do you want to know what's terrible? This is what I don't like about one of the. I've listed multiple things I don't like about college football. How about broadcasting? Vanderbilt is playing Texas this weekend. We all know Vanderbilt's the darling of the SEC right now. Everybody's making videos about it, making fun of it. I sent you one this week from Matt Mitchell. He's funny. That game is a ranked matchup. Texas at Vanderbilt. It's on the SEC network. They're not even putting it on television.
I mean, it's not on television, but it's not like
the SEC network. Owned by ESPN,
and
not everybody has the SEC network. You have to have the sports package on your cable company to even have.
You can't help it. You can't help it if a bunch of poors don't want to pay for the SEC network. You got to, if you want to watch college football, you got to pay for it. I don't know what else to say.
It's ranked on ranked, man. We talk every single week about there's only one ranked on ranked matchup this week, but one of them this week is Vanderbilt playing Texas. And the last time Vanderbilt played a ranked team in their half-finished stadium, they won the game. And now they're on the SEC network. Like, hey, Indiana, we don't respect you. You're undefeated in the Big Ten. Don't care. You're number 16. Vanderbilt, you get an SEC network game when you play the number 4 team in the country.
It's not going to happen. But let me ask you a question. What happens to the college football landscape if Vanderbilt, a team that lost to Georgia State but beat Alabama, what happens to the college football landscape if Vanderbilt somehow does the unthinkable again and is able to beat Texas and Alabama in the same season?
I honestly don't know, but I think you have to start looking at Vanderbilt as a possibility to actually make the college football playoff.
I think they're an automatic qualifier if they beat Alabama and Texas. I don't care they lost to Georgia State. If you beat Texas and Alabama in the same season, you're an automatic qualifier to make the playoff. I don't see how you don't.
Good for them if they're able to even play with Texas. Texas
is going to be mad.
I don't see it.
It's not one of the games where
we said that about Alabama when they were coming back and playing, South Carolina. We thought they were going to blow out. I thought they were going to blow out South Carolina when they're going to be mad about losing to Vanderbilt. They snuck by South Carolina and then lost again. I thought the same thing about Tennessee. Tennessee loses to Arkansas. I thought, oh my gosh, Florida has to play them the next week. Florida took them to overtime on their field. So you never know, man. They could do it. Maybe Texas is so demoralized that they can't even get up for Vandy. Because who can? Nobody's ever had to ever get up for Vandy.
Yeah, I'm with you. Something happened in this Georgia-Texas game that we should probably talk about because there've been a lot of questionable calls SEC officiating this season. During this Georgia-Texas game, there was a pass interference called against Texas on an interception that was not a pass interference call. They called it on the field, pass interference on the defense, 15 yards, first down. And at that point, fans at the University of Texas started littering the field with towels and trash and things that we've seen Other schools do, and it's not a good look on the university. But in the time that it took them to clean up the field, the officials got together and agreed that the pass interference was not a pass interference call. So they reversed the original call, despite the fact that penalties are not a reviewable call in college football. And it gave Texas the ball inside Georgia's red zone. They would go on to score and make the game look a little closer than it should have, because at that point, Georgia turned it back on, and Texas was not able to come back. There have been, apparently, Volley Polly says, eerily similar to Tennessee against Ole Miss with the garbage. So that being said, South Carolina had some really bad calls in the LSU game. There's somebody on social media talked about the guy that makes the funny videos. There's another one out there about all the different bad calls that have sort of plagued college football. So, Bill, I posed the question, and maybe we don't have to spend a lot of time on it because we're already halfway through the show and we have not gotten to the NFL yet. But should college football implement a rule that allows video review to overturn penalties? Because, like, at one side of it, like, you don't want to lengthen the game by reviewing everything, but you want to get the calls right. And getting the calls right, obviously they got the call right here in Texas, despite the fact that they did something they weren't supposed to do. But you've changed the outcomes of games this season. Miami, Virginia Tech was ended in controversy over a bad call. South Carolina, LSU, the outcome of that game changed over a bad call. Should college football implement video review to overturn penalties, Bill?
I mean, this sounds like deja vu a little bit, Ryan, because I think we were hanging out together and we watched this happen live and we were trying to figure out what was actually happening. I think the consensus between the two of us is yes. We've seen too many bad calls this season. Obviously, you guys took a loss, I think, because of one. And this is a little bit different situation. Texas was still getting dominated, and they still got dominated after this call was supposedly reversed. But I mean, yeah, if you're going to do things like this where the fans throw trash on the field, it causes a pause. Sarkisian's walking on the field telling the fans to stop, and then all of a sudden you come back and we didn't really know what had happened. We're like, how does Texas have the ball?
How did Texas get the ball back?
Yeah, they called a penalty. Yeah, if they're going to do weird things like this, then yes. I mean, this is ridiculous. My issue, I think, with the whole situation, Ryan, is we watched it live and watched the replay and thought that's an offensive penalty. We thought the penalty, the defensive back was standing in his place. The receiver ran directly into him and shoved him, and the defensive back kind of grabbed at him like, "Whoa, you've shoved me!" And then they called defensive penalty. You shoved me. You're shoving me. And so they call a defensive penalty. Sir, why have you shoved that? Well, you've shoved I. No, so it was ridiculous. The call was terrible. And you and I looked at each other like, that's an offensive penalty. Like, that's an offensive PI. And then they call it a defensive PI. They throw trash. The whole situation is ridiculous. The problem is, what are these officials seeing that they call it completely wrong? I can't figure that. We've talked about it too many times with calls changing games. This is another one that had the potential to change the game because at that moment, it felt like momentum had switched to Texas's favor. It got closer. Georgia still overcame that. But your situation with LSU was clearly something that changed the game. And
there was two plays in the final.
Scene?
There was two plays at the end of that game. Not just the interception return for touchdown that was called back, but we hit a pass that would have run off another 4 minutes off the clock that would have never allowed LSU to score. And we got called for an offensive pass interference that didn't exist, sort of like this play. And so, like, to your point, like, you cannot have calls altering the outcomes of games that are wrong. If that was a defensive pass interference and it allowed Georgia to extend the drive and go down the field and score and put the game out of reach, that's one thing. But if you say that's pass interference and wrong, or if it is pass interference, they don't call it. Texas intercepts it, runs it back, scores on the ensuing drive, and Texas is able to come back and win that game. That play is an outcome-altering call that should not leave it up. It's kind of like the strike zone in baseball. That the number of calls that are missed in the strike zone in baseball are the reason why everybody is fighting for robo-umps in baseball. Because these guys think that they can do and say and call plays however they want to. And everybody else just got to sit back and take it.
Yep.
And although they got this call right by reversing the pass interference, they should have never gotten to that point. the call shouldn't have been made. So I think we're both in a consensus, Mama Frick in the house. I think we both have the. I think we're both in agreement that there should be some sort of review.
What I worry about is the small schools. There are 120 plus Division I schools that play games
132,
every week, right?
I think. Yeah,
132 now. So there's 66 games every week or so. Is that the right? That's that math. I think I did that. That was pretty quick, wasn't it? Yeah. So it's 66 games. So you've got these teams that nobody cares about, and are they televised? Do they even have the ability to look at replay for some of those games? So I worry about changing the rule. They won't even be able to implement that in some of these games if there's no camera system involved.
But no, the FCS teams they all play with cameras now because they've got ESPN Plus.
Then if they can,
so they have camera crews. Yeah.
Yeah. Then if they can, if all the games are televised and you can see all of it for every game, then yes, I think they should do that.
Volley probably brings up a good point. I think the UFL already does this with the Super Challenge.
Well, baseball's doing it. Baseball does it for every call. You can challenge every call. There should be something involved. These officials are making too many mistakes. Andres Galarraga still doesn't have a perfect game. That makes no sense. Anyway, that's baseball. But these officials are making too many mistakes not to have this happen. Too many calls that they're too important to these games and too important to these teams. I mean, we're talking so much money, kids, recruits, everything that matters for every single one of these games. They should do something to fix it.
Well, let's skim over. It's a mini rivalry week this weekend in college football. A lot of rivalry games. They're going to fly under the radar because there's not a lot of good football this weekend. Specifically speaking, that these some of these rivalry games aren't going to be that competitive. You've got Notre Dame Navy. That's a game we're going to pick because Navy's undefeated. Notre Dame's ranked in the top 15. We'll get to that one later. Texas Tech TCU, a Texas in-state battle. I'm not sure if you call it a rivalry game, but that's there. Florida State taking on number 6 Miami. We've already agreed that Miami is going to beat the snot out of Florida State. That was supposed to be a tough game for them. It's not going to be. Michigan State gets a little more interesting because Michigan is no longer ranked a year after winning the national championship after taking that loss to Illinois last weekend. So you've got Michigan State, pretty big rivalry game. People that care about those schools are going to care about. And then you've also got Kansas. People in Michigan. And then you've got Kansas and number 16 Kansas State playing another rivalry game. Kansas was preseason picked to be really good. Sort of been a little disappointing, but Kansas normally isn't all that good at football anyway. So Kansas State has been pretty good this year. So some rivalry games in college football this weekend to check out. We'll pick a couple of games here later in the show. But let's get to some NFL talk, and we don't spend a lot of time on this because we already kind of talked about it earlier. DeAndre Hopkins earlier today traded to the Kansas City Chiefs for a conditional 4th round pick. Why do the rich keep getting richer, Bill? How were the Chiefs able to get DeAndre Hopkins for a 5th rounder or conditional 4th? There's so many teams that could have went out and got DeAndre Hopkins. Why were the Chiefs the ones to be able to do it?
Is that the rich getting richer?
Yes.
Do we think DeAndre Hopkins is actually worth, at 32 years old, is he actually worth the 4th round pick at this point?
You know what happened to Randy Moss when he finally went to play for a quarterback after leaving Minnesota?
He was still young. DeAndre Hopkins young. DeAndre Hopkins is almost as old as you are. You guys almost went to school together.
First of all, blank you. Second of all, no, the problem is DeAndre Hopkins, he looks old because he hasn't been playing with a quarterback since he left
I don't
Houston.
care. I honestly don't. I'm sorry. We had this argument, I think 2 years ago when he went to Tennessee, and we said this is where he goes to die. And he's died. He's gone. He's gone. It's over. I don't see it. I mean, he's going to get a couple targets here and there because he's DeAndre Hopkins. But I think they're going to be sorely disappointed when they find out he's really not as good as they hoped. They're just taking a flyer here. It's a 4th round draft pick. You don't get much for that. So
think about the other receivers that Kansas City took a flyer on. Went out Juju Smith-Schuster. Kind of, he's older. He's beaten up. Not great. Who's the guy that came from New York that dropped all those passes last season?
Mecole Hardman.
Not Mecole Hardman's back, but he's lost a step after playing for a couple different teams.
The other one, the Florida Gator, the 1st round draft pick.
Drops McGee.
Yeah, I can't think of his name.
Yeah, okay. It's that forgettable.
Yeah,
they haven't had a name. They haven't had a big name wide receiver since Tyreek Hill left. And although DeAndre Hopkins is going to be that burner, DeAndre Hopkins is going to be that guy that's going to get some pressure off of Travis Kelce.
I don't know.
He's going to draw some coverage to himself, and he's going to be able to go out and get open. I like this move for the Kansas City Chiefs. I like this move for DeAndre Hopkins. to sort of revitalize his career before it comes to an end. Your Uncle Gary coming in. Aren't you glad Bill doesn't wear this color every week? Very much so.
Yep.
Gary, very much so. Let's move on because we had another slew of injuries plagued the NFL this past weekend. Chris Godwin dislocated his ankle in the final minute of his loss against to the Ravens. If you haven't looked at this injury, I don't recommend you do it. His foot was literally turned the other way. He is out for the season. He was having a career season. He was ranked number 2 in fantasy amongst wide receivers in PPR, and he's going into the offseason as a free agent. Really, really bad news for Chris Godwin having a career season, almost 600 receiving yards in this season. And his teammate Mike Evans, going up for a second touchdown in that game, comes down, re-aggravates his hamstring injury. He is going to be shut down until at least week 12. So the all of a sudden, the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, who look to be competitive in the NFC South, lose their top 2 receiving threats. You've also got Brandon Ayuk, who infamously had his contract dispute in the offseason, torn MCL and ACL last weekend. They don't know if there's more damage he has to get to. He is out for this season. I'm trying to think of the other ones as they crawl across the ticker here. Jaden Daniels suffers a midsection injury, an abdomen injury, in the first quarter of the Panthers game. Does not return. That is not intended, or that is not thought to be serious. They expect him to maybe miss a week at most, maybe 2. But Marcus Mariota came out against the Panthers, and granted it's the Panthers, but threw for 200 yards and a couple of scores there. Another big one, we talked about how bad he was. Deshaun Watson tears his Achilles in a non-contact injury to thunderous applause by the Cleveland Browns, and that's the kind of one that I want to get to. Real quick, Andy Dalton also had a car accident that took place on Tuesday and has an injury to his throwing thumb. So Bryce Young is set to get the start with the Carolina Panthers again here in Week 8. But let's talk about Deshaun Watson for a second, because after he goes down, the fans in Cleveland, being the class act that the Cleveland fans are, decided to cheer the injury to the $175 million man in Deshaun Watson as he is carted off the field in tears. Both Myles Garrett and Jameis Winston came out after the game to share their disdain with the crowd for doing it and defend their quarterback and their teammate. Bill, what are your thoughts on a team cheering their own player going down with a season-ending injury?
It's awful. It's awful. I don't really have much else to say about that, but those, not that they ever will be, but the people in Cleveland should be ashamed. That's terrible. I get the frustration. I get he's not performing the way you want him to be performing. He's clearly was not having a good year. But to cheer someone else's injury is just classless. That's just terrible.
I've said it about the state of Ohio, but I'm going to say it directly about Cleveland now. Cleveland is such a great town that LeBron decided to leave twice. Okay. There's a reason why there's a reason why there's so many people living in the state of South Carolina that have moved away from Ohio. There's a reason why we are surrounded by Ohio State fans here and not living in the state of Ohio. That's
right. Because I actually went to a brewery up in North Carolina that had like a giant Ohio State club. I didn't think anything of it. There was hundreds of people there that were Ohio State fans. Never thought anything of it.
I've told this story before, and I'll say it again. There's these little car decals you can get from the local sports stores, or there's a store called Palmetto Moon. There's a free plug for them that sells these car decals that have it's got the Palmetto. It's like the South Carolina state flag, the Palmetto tree and the crescent moon. And they make Clemson and South Carolina ones where instead of the actual Palmetto, the tree, it's the logo of the school. Apparently in Charleston, South Carolina, there was one made with the O from Ohio State on the top of the tree. And I thought there was going to be a lynching and a collecting of Ohio State fans in Charleston because the locals lost their minds. Shame. Listen, as you can say whatever you want about Deshaun Watson being a scumbag for what he did with the lawsuits, with the sexual misconduct. I don't care about
that. You never cheer for somebody's injury.
That's my point. You can dislike the guy. I never started liking Ben Roethlisberger after what he did and what he had to get away with. It's one of those things that I never forgot what he did, like a lot of people did. And the thing is, nobody ever forgot about what Deshaun Watson did. Problem is, he was getting paid a lot of money not to play well. And so you can have your personal opinion on him for whatever the case is, but like cheering a guy that is, I mean, what Jameis Winston said, albeit despite the fact that his off the field stuff is what it is, he's putting his body on the line. We talk about a guy like Tua Tagovailoa who is had to have discussions with his doctors, with his family, that he wants to come back after another concussion. He's putting his livelihood, he's putting his life on the line to go play football, to go play a game that we all tend to enjoy, and to laud and cheer for a guy that gets hurt. Like, I think that's all that needs to be said. Shame on him, or shame on them, shame on the fans of Cleveland. If I'm any star for that Cleveland Browns team, I'm asking for a trade immediately because I don't want to be in that town anymore. So Myles Garrett, if you're looking for a change of scenery, I hear Detroit's looking for another defensive end.
Trade me immediately.
Yep. That's what I would ask. We talked about Tua in your Homer's Corner. Cooper Kupp is also set to return from his injury this week. He is all good to go for the Thursday night football game. That's really it. I don't know why. At this point, I don't know why I put that on the agenda tonight.
Trade me immediately.
There also talks about Cooper Kupp being on the trade market leading up to the trade deadline, but we don't know what's going on there. Shout out to anybody watching on the stream on Instagram. JD, our buddy Big Tex, formerly of the BRBT podcast we've done in the past together, says that Myles Garrett isn't going to Detroit. Of course he's not going to Detroit, but I can be a wishful thinker the same way that I'd like to see Max Crosby in Detroit. All right, Bill, because we're running short on time, and I didn't want to spend a whole lot of time on Tua and Cooper Kupp. We've reached fantasy football buys and sells, bullies buys and sells, Bill's factor crap. Last week did not bode too well for me. I went 4-4. You went 5-3. You've officially taken a lead on me on the season, 34-22 with your factor crap, 33-23 for me. And so we're going to get right into it here. Give you some fantasy football advice heading into the weekend. Some names that you're probably going to say they're no-brainers. Some names maybe not.
Low-hanging fruit.
There are some low-hanging fruit. Big Tex thinks that Cooper Kupp is going to the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, his Buccaneers.
They need him.
They need him right now, honestly. Let's go ahead and start off my quarterback buy this week. And there's a quarterback by the name of Bo Nix, rookie quarterback out of Oregon by way of Auburn. He has projected 21.1 fantasy points this weekend, but he's going against the Carolina Panthers at home, giving up the fourth most points to opposing quarterbacks. The Carolina Panthers made Marcus Mariota look like a Pro Bowler last week, which is why, even though it's a pretty high projection, I'm buying Bo Nix this week. Bill, what say you factor crap that Bo Nix exceeds 21 points?
There is zero analysis needed for this other than the fact that the Panthers absolutely stink. Fact.
All right, let's go on to my running back buy this week, and this should be a no-brainer too. Running back Nick Chubb of the Cleveland Browns returned to action after a horrifying knee injury that took place last season. His second of such injury. Played in his first game last week, found the end zone in his first game back. He is projected 12.6 points. He is at home against the Baltimore Ravens, who are ranked 14th against running backs in fantasy this season. So towards the upper end of defending running backs in fantasy football. But listen, Jameis Winston is going to be starting quarterback for the Cleveland Browns. I'm not sure who he's got to throw it to. I'm sure they're going to rely on Nick Chubb a lot in this game, which is why I think Nick Chubb is going to he was able to ease back into it, finding the end zone last week. I think Nick Chubb is going to be the Nick Chubb that we all have seen in the past, which bodes well for my trade value for him because I have him rostered in a couple of fantasy teams. Bill, what say you factor crap Nick Chubb exceeds 12.6 points?
You know what they say about this one, Ryan? They say, wrong again, Ryan. 11 carries, 22 yards is what he had last week. He did get in the end zone because, somebody's got to score. But no. He only had 10.2 points last week, and he's not going to do any better this week. The Ravens are a much better team. They're going to get smoked in this game. And no, Nick Chubb does nothing. So crap.
All right. I'll take it. I think Nick Chubb gets more than 11 carries this week, so we'll see. This wide receiver is a no-brainer because when you drafted him in the first round, you were starting him every week. But it's his first game back from injury, and that's wide receiver Cooper Kupp, projected 15.1 fantasy points at home against the Minnesota Vikings, coming off a loss to my Detroit Lions last week. And the Minnesota Vikings allow the most points to opposing wide receivers in fantasy. Just gave up a big day to Amon-Ra St. Brown last week. And which, again, it's a no-brainer because if you got Cooper Kupp, you're starting him. But I just want to be able to put him on this list because this is his first game back. And, people might be concerned about him being on a pitch count or, trying to take it easy on him. But I think he goes off against the Vikings. Bill, what say you?
Fact on this one. Your analysis is spot on. This is the best player on the field for the Rams. He's going to score.
All right, let's move on to my tight end. And this is a guy that makes the list again here. I wish you knew who Chris Jericho was and you remember the list of Jericho.
I wouldn't care anyway.
It's amazing. Tucker Kraft, tight end for the Green Bay Packers, projected 10.6 points this week at the Jacksonville Jaguars, giving up the 7th most points to opposing tight ends. Sunday, 1 o'clock kickoff. Tucker Kraft is very quietly the number 4 scoring tight end in PPR fantasy football, according to ESPN this season. He had, I don't think he had a great week last week, but 10.6 is a pretty low projection. I believe this game is it's not the London game. Jacksonville finally getting to come home here. But I like Tucker Kraft in this game, Bill. What's you factor Tucker Kraft exceeds 10.6 points.
You know what's wild about this guy, Ryan, is you just said he's a really high fantasy scorer, and he only has 21 receptions in 7 games. So he's only getting 3 catches per game, but the reality, he gets almost a touchdown in every game. So that's what's causing him to score a ton of points. Do you believe in him scoring a touchdown in this game? I'm not so sure, so I'm going to call crap on this one.
Wow, I don't know why I thought you were going to agree with me there. That's kind of upsetting.
Because you're terrible at picking things, so yeah, I'm not going to. Why would I?
Save that for podcast pick'em, okay? Let's just save that for podcast pick'em.
I'm talking about this. The podcast pick'em is much better than me this year.
Also, volleyball, it was Kadarius Toney.
That's the wide receiver. Thank you, Polly.
Thanks, Volley. All right, let's go into my quarterbacks or my players that I'm selling in fantasy football this week. And let's start off with Justin Herbert. Over 300 passing yards last week against the Cardinals, but 0 touchdowns to go with it. He has projected 21 points at home against the New Orleans Saints, who are giving up the 6th fewest points to opposing quarterbacks. It is a 4:05 kickoff here. Bill, what say you? Factor crap, Justin Herbert under 21 points.
The Saints are broken. They're very broken. The whole team is garbage right now. They cannot win games. I think the Chargers are going to win this game, but you're right. They just only one time have given up more. The Saints have given up more than 20 points in a game. So I think this is a fact. I'm going to give you a fact on this one. Only one time it was against Tampa Bay and Baker Mayfield that scored more than 20 points against the Saints this year.
And that was when he had both Mike Evans and Chris Godwin.
Right.
Let's go to my running back that I'm selling this week. And this might be a surprising name, but I'm going to go with Jonathan Taylor, running back for the Indianapolis Colts, projected 17 points. That's a huge projection for a running back against the Houston Texans this weekend on the road, who are giving up the 4th fewest points to opposing running backs this season. 17 is a huge number, and Jonathan Taylor's banged up. He was questionable when I looked at the app earlier today. I do not like this. If I've got a better running back on my bench, I'm thinking about starting him over Jonathan Taylor. Bill, let's say you factor crap under on the 17 points.
Fact, because they don't know if he's going to play. So he still has an injury designation, and they aren't saying that he's back yet. So yeah, I'd be crazy to say no, you're wrong, Ryan, and that he doesn't play.
Yeah. I wish I could pull these numbers up real quick. My wide receiver that I'm selling this week is Marvin Harrison Jr. He has projected 13 points, pretty low projection for a wide receiver here, especially a wide receiver 1, going up against the Miami Dolphins, who are giving up the fewest points to opposing wide receivers this season. I tried to make a trade for Marvin Harrison Jr. this week because it's like a buy low on him. His last 3 weeks, he has 5 catches for 57 yards and 0 touchdowns over the last 3 weeks, coming off of 4 straight weeks where he had 4 or more receptions and 4 touchdowns. He has not scored since week 4 against, of all teams, the Washington Commanders, and going up against a stout defense in the the Miami Dolphins.
Say it again.
Miami Dolphins, a stout defense of the Miami Dolphins.
All right, good.
With an offense, with a Dolphins offense that should be able to stay on the field and minimize those possessions for Arizona. That's why I'm selling Marvin Harrison in this low 13 points. Bill, factor crap under 13 points for Marvin Harrison Jr.
I think that's a fact as well. Like you said, he's been really bad recently, and Miami does not They've been playing really good pass defense with Kendall Fuller and Jalen Ramsey as their corners. Cater Coe, who had a pretty good game last week. And granted, they have been playing pretty bad teams. None of these teams can really throw. Indianapolis, they played Tennessee. They're both bad. Those last 2 weeks. Patriots 2 weeks ago, and they can't throw either. So it's been three games of really bad teams that can throw. Anyway, I do think this is a fact. I don't think Marvin Harrison scores very well this week. He's off. I've never been a fan of his. So I think we're seeing exactly who we thought he was.
Bill, a spoiler alert. I think I got you. I think you went 4-4 last week too. I need to go back and check because Drake May exceeded his projection.
Who?
And you called crap. Drake May exceeded his 18.3 points. I've either got 1 point. I've either got one game wrong, or you've got one. Either way, I'll fix it after the show. But
you should probably get an instant replay for that.
You might have gone 4-4 last week instead of 5-3.
Just like the officials, Ryan. What's wrong with you?
I know. I'm what a bad semi-professional podcaster here. Listen, no, you can't be called professional if you're not getting paid to do it.
You've been paid. There's that. You've been paid. It might be in tickets and booze, but it still counts as being paid.
Okay, touche. Yeah. All right, let's get the tight end that I'm selling this week. And there's another guy that's landed on this list earlier in the season, and that's Travis Kelce. Projected 10.7 points at the Las Vegas Raiders, giving up the 8th fewest points to opposing tight ends in fantasy. You talk about a guy who has been absolutely disappointing. Kelce has completely fallen off this season as I'm pulling up his stats now in PPR. He had 2 good weeks in week 4 and 5 against the Chargers and the Saints. 16.7 catches for 89 yards, 9 catches for 70 yards. But beyond that, 3 catches, 1 catch, 4 catches. And then he had 4 catches last week against the San Francisco team that's banged up. Bill, would you believe it if I told you that Travis Kelce has not caught a touchdown pass this season?
That's wild.
I know. And not to mention DeAndre Hopkins is going to come in. And I'm telling you, I think he's going to get some target share in this game. And so I hate Travis Kelce this week. I'm not at this point, you can't really trust starting Travis Kelce, which is crazy to think. But yeah, I'm selling Travis Kelce in his 10.7 points. Bill, factor crap under that 10.7 points.
I think the only good news is we know that, the Swifties are telling us he is scoring off the field, Ryan. So that's good. But I'm actually looking at the Raiders stats against tight ends, and even though they're not a great team, they actually have been playing decent defense. And especially against tight ends, only a couple times have they given up more double-digit points to Baltimore and Cleveland, of all teams. So
David Njoku, yeah.
Yeah, but other than that, nothing great. I don't love the Raiders, and I think, are we going to see DeAndre Hopkins on the field? Is he going to learn the offense fast enough so they can try to pull some pressure off of Travis Kelce? I don't think he's good, but I think people are still going to give him some coverage. You said it. So I'm gonna call crap on this one, Ryan. I think Travis Kelce is going to be focused on a little bit here.
Listen, that's a fair analysis, and we'll see.
I think that's scary. I cannot believe that's. And I don't want to say. Let's call it gutsy. I was going to call it something else starts with a B, but that's pretty gutsy putting Travis Kelce in your factor crap on the crap side or on the sell side.
It's the second time I've done it this season, Bill. I did it back in.
Wow. Were you right last time?
Week 5. No, that was the one. That was the week that he played the Saints, and he had like 17 points.
Oh, so what you're saying is you're going to be wrong again, Ryan?
Oh, I hate you so much.
Look at that. I was like a slam dunk. He fades back for 2. Kobe.
You're talking about low-hanging fruit. I swear to God. All right. We're running short on time, so let's go ahead and get into podcast pick'ems here for week 9. Bill, last week was a good week for me. I went 4-1. The problem is we both took the Lions to beat the Vikings, and they did, but they only won by 2, which didn't beat the spread. The same thing happened on the opposite side. We both took the Texans to beat the Packers. The Packers also won by 2. So the same thing that helped us win a game this week also caused us to lose a game this week. Otherwise, I go a perfect 5-0. Instead, I go 4-1. But Bill, talk about being wrong. You went 2-3 last week.
Dude, I don't get it.
You are 17-23 on the season picking against the spread in this show. I finally broke 500 and got to 20-20 after a 4-1 week.
That's not breaking 500, Ryan. That's meeting 500.
Getting to 500 is breaking that seal of having a losing record. That's how I'll take it. So super happy that I'm able to get to 500, and hopefully I can continue to do better.
Well, now that 2 is back, me and the Dolphins are making a run. Let's go.
All right, let's start off in college football here. I mentioned it. Notre Dame, number 12 team in the country, a 13-point favorite. I don't want to call it on the road. They're taking on number 24 Navy, the undefeated Navy midshipmen. Saturday is a noon kickoff over on ABC. This game is being played at MetLife Stadium, where the Jets and Giants play over in East Rutherford, New Jersey. The Notre Dame Fighting Irish are a 13-point favorite. I put this game on here for a reason. Bill, what say you? Does Navy have a shot to cover this 13-point spread against Notre Dame?
Wow. I'm going to say anchors away, my boys. Pitter patter. Let's get at her. Let's go midshipmen. I'm going to take them and the points. Let's go Navy. Let's do this.
I'm surprised that you took Navy because we've talked about this game before. Because I'm gonna go one even further. I think Navy beats Notre Dame this weekend.
Wow. Outright.
I'm taking Navy with the points, but legitimately, if there has never been a chance in the past for Notre Dame to get beaten by a service academy team, now is the time. Notre Dame lost to Northern Illinois earlier this season, who hasn't been that great. And Navy still runs that like pseudo option offense to keep the ball out of the opposing offense's hands. I love Navy to get the upset this week. I told you, I think last week, it might have been on the show or off the show. I truly want to see Army and Navy go into their Army-Navy game at the end of the season, both undefeated, playing for a shot, because they're both going to be in their own conference championship games. But I want to see them go into that game undefeated, and I would love to see Army and Navy go into the college football playoff at 11-12. That's what I want to see.
This is crazy talk.
Steven. Volleyball, I think so too. He says Navy wins outright. Wow, yeah. And when Navy wins outright, I can't wait to come back on this show next week. The last show we're going to have before we go on our cruise, and tell the world.
I'll look like this.
Y'all need to start listening to me when it comes to talking football and picking football games. Speaking of
y'all need to start listening to. Did you see how Southern he got right there? Like y'all need to start listening to me.
Y'all need to start listening to me, if you know what I'm saying. All right. Next game in college football, we're going to pick number 8 LSU at Texas A&M, the number 14 team in the country. Texas A&M at home, a 2.5-point favorite, basically getting the home field advantage pick in this game. Saturday, it is the 7:30. It is the night game over on ABC, played at Kyle Field at College Station, Texas. Bill, listen, LSU, for all intents and purposes, should have lost to South Carolina. They had to take Ole Miss to overtime. There's been games where they didn't look great, but right now they're right up there in the SEC. Believe it or not, number 14 Texas A&M sits atop the SEC standings with that loss that Texas took last week. Seeing that they're playing a night game at home at Texas A&M, I like Texas A&M to win this game. I also want Texas A&M to win this game because I don't want them to be the third ranked team to lose the week before they play South Carolina. Give me Texas A&M to win this game and cover this 2.5-point spread. Bill, what say you? LSU, Texas A&M.
You know, I pumped Texas A&M pretty good a couple weeks ago, and I was thinking, man, they're on a roll. They're going to do good things. Listen, I'm getting Southern too. They're going to be good, and they scared me last week. Last week, they did not have the game I expected them to have. They played Mississippi State, who Florida absolutely pounded at Mississippi State. Now, granted, Texas A&M was on the road as well in that game, but they only beat them by 10. So now I'm very nervous, but I agree with you. At Kyle Field at night, that place is absolutely bonkers when they play there. So I'm going to take Texas A&M against the points in this game, but I don't feel good about it.
Yeah, I mean, this is probably going to be the best game to watch this weekend. I'm going to watch Notre Dame Navy just because I'm rooting for Navy so hard, and if that game gets out of hand in favor of Notre Dame, I'll turn it off. But I definitely want to catch this LSU Texas A&M game with Clemson, South Carolina, and Furman all on a bye this week. Let's go over to the NFL slate, and we're going to talk some weird games here because honestly, there's not a lot of intriguing games in the NFL this weekend. I don't even know who the Lions are playing off the top of my head.
Nobody cares, right?
But I know who they're playing. They're playing the Titans, and that game's not even going to be close, so it wasn't worth picking. So we're going to pick in the AFC South as the Indianapolis Colts take on division rival Houston Texans. Sunday, 1 o'clock kickoff on CBS. Check your local listings like I'm a professional sportscaster here. Houston, a 5-point favorite at home. The Colts just knocked off the Dolphins, despite the fact the
Nobody wants to talk about that.
Bill, what say you? Texans hosting the Colts.
Texans 5-point under. I'm sorry, 5-point favorite. Well, I always look at that and look at it wrong. I'm like, Texans, man, they're a much better team. The Colts stink. Anthony Richardson is still garbage. I watched him play the entire game last week. He doesn't know how to throw.
Yeah, give me Houston too. I mean, 5 points is still a decent spread. But like you said, the Colts aren't that good. So give me the Texans here.
Yeah.
Now we get to pick the game that Bill wants to talk about this
Yes,
weekend.
sir.
The Arizona Cardinals going to the Miami Dolphins.
It's coming out party. Take two.
With Tua Tagovailoa. It seems like everybody's pretty much healthy on that offense. Not to mention, I believe Jonnu Smith came last week and decided to be a part of that offensive production with, I don't even know who you were playing at quarterback last week, but Jonnu Smith adds another dynamic. Yeah, that's right. Dynamic to this offense.
Snoop Huntley started, Tim Boyle finished.
There you go. Could
have been me. Wouldn't have mattered.
Dolphins, 3.5-point favorite Sunday on Fox. That might be the local game. I want to make sure that line has not changed. It has not. Bill, give me the Dolphins, man. I picked the Dolphins preseason to win the AFC East. Tua's injury kind of deterred from that. But I still think that division is wide open. The Bills have looked like world beaters at times, but they've also looked very beatable at times. Give me Miami, Bill. I think I know what you're going to say, but what say you?
I'll take the Dolphins as well. Yeah, I'll take the Dolphins. I actually had the Dolphins, I think 7-0 at this point in the season. And if Tua doesn't get hurt in that Buffalo game, I think they only lose the Buffalo game. So yeah, I think the Dolphins are going to be a much, much improved team this week, especially on offense, obviously.
I need to check my list. I haven't checked that list in a couple of weeks to see where I had Miami at this point in the season. The last game we're going to pick is interesting because the Philadelphia Eagles are traveling to Cincinnati to take on the Bengals. The Eagles have a winning record. The Bengals do not. But Philadelphia goes into Cincinnati as a road underdog. Bengals a 2.5-point favorite at home. That's another Sunday 1:00 kickoff over on CBS. Bill, what say you? Eagles at Bengals, with the Bengals being a home favorite against a winning record Philadelphia Eagles.
I don't feel good about the Bengals. They don't make me feel good. Something's wrong with Joe Burrow. And remember when he gets injured, he plays terrible. And I wonder if there's some undisclosed injury. Remember when he had the calf injury and he was just really, really bad, and then it finally got better and he started to play well? I feel like something's wrong. So the Eagles scare me. Jalen Hurts hasn't been great, but Saquon Barkley's freaking fantastic. So, and A.J. Brown is healthy again. So I'm going to go with the Eagles. I think they're a better team right now.
Yeah, to your point, I think the offense is finally starting to mesh in Cincinnati. I know they just beat Cleveland last weekend.
Oh, they beat Cleveland.
But listen, I get what I'm saying. But I mean, they
beat
I think
Jacksonville. They're ready to go.
I think the problem with Cincinnati is that they still lack a run game, but T. Higgins is finally starting to get involved after his injury / holdout to start the season. Jamar Chase looked really good in this game last weekend against the Browns. I'm going to take the Bengals, man. Like, I know it's a 1:00 kickoff at home. I think I like Cincinnati's fans more than I like Cleveland right now. But to your point, like, Philadelphia's got Jalen Hurts and A.J. Brown and Devontae Smith and Saquon Barkley. But there's a reason why Cincinnati's favored in this game, albeit, basically getting the home cooking with Vegas. So, give me the Bengals just so we can have one game, because right now we picked every game alike. So I'll give you a shot to go 5-0 next week if the Eagles are able to beat the Bengals. Bill, that's the end of the show. Anything you want to talk about before we leave?
One more week, brother. And by the way, I wanted to say we don't get to watch college football this weekend because we're going to a Halloween party.
Oh, man, she's not going to put the games on.
No, she won't do that.
So, fun story, and then we'll get off since we are in overtime. A few years ago, I went to a Halloween party for someone who shall not be named, and it was their work party. She got so hammered that night that we actually had to pick her up and carry her out of this clubhouse. True story. Drove down a road in Greenville and had her pushed out the window of the car in case she was going to throw up. That's how sick this person was. But at that Halloween party, South Carolina played Missouri on the road. And Connor Shaw did not start this game because he was hurt, very, very badly hurt. And we were down 17-0 in this game with Dylan Thompson at quarterback. And injured Connor Shaw came in and played savior, and we beat Missouri that year in double overtime. And every single guy at this party was behind me in the corner of the room watching the game on my phone as we were able to come back and knock off Missouri. I'm not saying that I'm going to have my phone on the Texas A&M LSU game at the Halloween party this weekend, but I might have the LSU Texas A&M game one of my phone.
It's not happening at her house. You know how that works.
I guess she'll have to turn off her Wi-Fi. I don't know. I'm kidding.
Yeah,
I'm obviously kidding.
It happens.
I'm kidding. I'm not going to have the game on my phone. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
All right. If you want to follow the show, first of all, thanks to everybody who joined the show, be it Facebook, YouTube, or Instagram tonight. I've had a couple viewers over there. Not as much interaction, but that's okay. We talked about this. I didn't do a good job of promoting the show. It's been kind of a long week, weirdly. And I should mention, you talked about this. We got one more week. Next week will be our last show for 2 weeks as we're going on a cruise at the end of next week. So we've got one more show, and then we're going to take a week break to go on vacation in November. But in the meantime, if you want to check us out on social media, you can go to facebook.com/tapoutsandtouchdowns, on X at tapouts and TDs, YouTube at tapouts and touchdowns. You can follow me on Instagram at Ryan Frick Comedy. I do also want to mention that I put out another wrestling episode this past Monday. It was part 2 of the Vince McMahon documentary review, the crossover episode with the Whatever Face podcast that I'm going to post on Facebook or post on social media because I didn't do a good job of promoting that. I scheduled it to go off. I was at an open mic that night and forgot to post it. And here we are, live football show, and I still haven't posted anything to promote that. There have been some people that have listened to it so far, but it is a podcast exclusive. So whether you listen on Spotify, Apple, Google Podcasts, wherever you listen, it is available there now. So make sure if you want to hear us, myself, Hollywood, and PJ Steven talk about the Vince McMahon documentary, you can go and find those on your podcast apps. But as far as the football show goes, we'll be back next week to talk more football. I don't know. Should we do pick'ems next week since we won't be able to watch? We'll figure it out next week.
Anyway.
I'm not going to
do it anyway.
Yeah.
We're doing it live.
We'll do it live. Epic. We'll do it live. So yeah, next week will be our last football show for a couple of weeks. Don't know when we're going to do the next wrestling show, but join us next week as we give our penultimate show before we go for a week, and talk some more football. For Baker Bill, it's your guy Bill Leroy. Thank everybody who was a part of the show tonight, and we'll see you next time right here on Tap Outs and Touchdowns.